So the real title of this sermon is I Used to Be a Plastic Bottle, and I'll explain more, but I've got to do a little prep work first. And how many of you were here last week for Palm Sunday? Well, about half of you, it looks like. No judgment implied. I just want to refer, to Micah's distinction between the Jesus of Passover and the Jesus of Easter. And because Micah Busey, hi Micah, Micah's sermon was so good and the service was so good, we have banned him from the preaching schedule. That was really the only thing that could possibly be done with a sermon that good. The competition is just too serious. And that is, of course, one way to deal with the issue of competition. You just eliminate it. You act as though your speck in time and space were the only one, and you hang on to that speck in time and space for all you've got. You totalize and terrorize yourself with your own presence in time and space and how overly important it is. You will not have any fun, but by God, you will prevail. Now, today, obviously, I'm going to offer some alternatives to that method of being. And please note that the theme of mentoring was chosen a month or so ago, easily, when Aubrey agreed to dance and showed us that he wanted to do something about mentoring because he thought it had something to do with the Easter story. So, Micah, I'm not going to blame this whole thing on you. There is no direct relationship to Micah's home run last week and my being timidly at bat today. But there is a very direct relationship between Easter and mentoring, between what happened between Mary and Jesus at the tomb. You heard it. He called her by name, Mary. And like anybody who's looking for a mentor, she knew that something wonderful had happened. Somebody had called her by name, and she responded saying, Rabboni. She called him by name, and in that act, we saw a beautiful example of mutual mentoring. They both called each other out by each other's name. She mentored him as much as he mentored her. And many of us, older and younger, know that we are in a profound period of time where mutual mentoring is a life and death matter. So if you get nothing else from Easter today, understanding that mentoring is always mutual. Name, 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 name. The energy releases when it is more mutual and depletes when it is less mutual. The energy increases when the student betters the teacher, and the teacher therefore rises from the grave of uselessness or disposability. It releases and increases, and then it finally explodes into something like salvation when the teacher and the student respect each other so much that they learn to matter, and by that mattering, remake the world, restore the oceans, laugh a lot, and love a lot. So, translated, if somebody calls you a fossil or a dinosaur this week, say thank you very much. Or if someone calls you a child or a naif this week, tell him or her, thank you very much. I appreciate your recognizing part of me. Let's keep going. Enter the plastic bottle. You may or may not know that plastic bottles have an afterlife. They congregate at the bottom of oceans, and they live there for a very long time. They could have been a glass or a jar or something that went goodbye, but they are not. There at the bottom of the ocean, they wreak havoc on fish and water while suffering that hell that is reserved for those who prevail and are useless or empty or both. The truth of the matter is that nobody really needs a plastic bottle. They are an invention of late-stage capitalism and join the styrofoam coffee cup and its plastic lid in being useful for the smallest speck of time. A vessel goes to shards and ends up in a museum. A ceramic cup joins the user for so many mornings, holding her coffee, that they become partners in opening the day. Plastic, on the other hand, says a daughter of this congregation, Sarah Kornfeld, who happens to be an expert on this matter, Larry and Margaret's daughter. Sarah says that plastic is a post-World War II invention. Quoting her, "It's really important for us to accept that plastic was created with the hope to remove the edges from the suffering of World War II. We wanted a world where nothing would break again and where nothing would shatter. The paradox is right in front of us. We created something in the face of war and horror that we thought would protect us from pain and glass and shards and brokenness. And to avoid a war with glass, we have created a Shoah of ocean toxins." Another scientist, Tasha Adkins from the University of Vermont, tells me that we really can't study the plastic conglomerations below the ocean floor. We can only see what's on the surface, and what we know is that there is an extraordinarily rapidly increasing amount of plastic on the surface of the ocean, and by that test, we can tell that probably 8 times as much of that is below the ocean floor, refusing to die, existing as a plastic tentacled ribbon. That would be, according to her estimate, twice the size of the state of Texas. What both of these scientists said to me is that the problem of plastic is not just that the ocean is becoming a toxic chemical soup. They also are concerned about the encouragement to us to become a disposable culture in general. It changes us to be surrounded by disposability. It becomes easier to call someone white trash if plastic is the petty and putrid poetry of our existence. Ironically, things that don't die, like plastic, teach us to think we're disposable, and they break the cycle of mentoring, which releases energy, increases energy, and explodes life into that thing we call salvation. Mentoring, like parenting, also involves a lot of suffering along the way, as anyone who has been mentored or is being mentored knows. Mentoring is a cup filled with joy and sorrow. I used to be a plastic bottle, and I'm hoping to become a vessel. When I say that Easter is a great mentor, I mean that Easter is better as a mentor than Aubrey and his magnificent dance, thank you so much, or Paul, or John, or Mary. Easter tells you that you are teachable, that someone can call you by name. You are not disposable. You are recyclable. You can be used again. You are resurrectable. There is a big difference between being disposable and unbreakable, and being disposed to break, even to shatter. To show you these things, I have to teach you a little bit more about midrash, a form of reading ancient texts that lets you hear them as though they knew your name. In midrash, you particularize the story. You imagine the competition between Peter and John as they run to the tomb, one getting there first, the other getting there second, one going into the tomb and then being followed by the other. You're talking about that day, the day of their race uphill, as though it were your day today and your race. So just think a minute about where we are right now. We are at Judson Memorial Church. It is 2014, a few years before climate catastrophe will call our name. And a few years after, terror took out a tall building a few miles from here. That terror was possible because we had lost our bearings as mortals in a continuing line, as mentors in a mutual mentoring. Note how the totalitarian and the terrorist work. They work as though now something must be done. This has to stop. Now is what's important. We can't take it another moment. Let's kill someone, or shame someone, or blame someone. The next catastrophe will happen the same way. We'll say, it's too much, this time. It may be the turtles and the fish who say, enough. What amuses me about this place that we are in, and it really does amuse me, is how conservative it is about how avant it is. We've been pretty much the same institution in the same place for almost 125 years, and we can't stop bragging about how new and bold we are. We're so conservative about our openness that it's astonishing. Judson is actually profoundly conservative as an avant, almost disappointed when the Easter dancers wear clothes. And note today that we blended the ancient and modern testimony with words that Mariana read, words of her own making, and words from the Gospel of John. We like to blend. And it really is the only way you can be avant and contemporary. And you find an ancient tradition and you feed your inner fish with it. It's called midrash. Midrash is the mentoring of sacred texts. You disciple them, you apprentice them, you reinterpret them. And if you are like any good mentee, you act as though your new interpretation is the best interpretation that anyone has ever come up with ever before. That's your job. It is to improve on the past. Midrash knows that this year Passover and Easter are the same week. And it remembers that the Easter characters came to the grave from a Passover table. They had been at table, saying the Passover blessings. They were there as disciples, apprentices, mentees. They were following a leader. But as Aviva Zornberg points out in her method of Midrash, they didn't really have a leader. They'd given up on the old ones, and they weren't sure about the new one yet. Very few people get to quote a Kornfeld and a Zornberg in the same Easter sermon. So Zornberg goes on telling the story of the Exodus as the complete transformation of God, Pharaoh, and Moses. You see, a text is resurrected when you turn it into a living vessel. What happens in the Passover story is all about Moses telling God, you've got to be kidding. Moses is asked by God, oh, please be my leader, over and over, and every single time he says, not me. Find another you-know-what. Moses doesn't want to lead. He doesn't feel worthy. His entire answer to God is thanks but no thanks, and still Pharaoh is chasing the people who wonder when the next plague is going to come. But still the people find their feet. They cross through the Red Sea. In the middle of the Red Sea, not knowing if they have a leader back then, and knowing that some of them don't trust that leader, and even more, that leader didn't want to be the leader, they get in the middle of the Red Sea, and she says that they begin to sing. Not knowing that they're going to come out the other side, not convinced they have the leadership they need, but they begin to sing. And their singing evokes the leader in themselves. You could actually argue that Moses' refusal to mentor became his capacity to mentor. The seas part finally in a reluctant or nearly leaderless leadership of the people. Parenthetical peeve, I really wonder about people who like to say they are seeking spirituality. I'll bet they're not. Now that you know a little bit more about Midrash, let's take it to our story, the Easter story, in all their jumbles. We should surely Moses, our leaders. Don't trust them too much. Or better put, trust yourself and each other more than you trust your leader. The really good ones don't want to be leaders at all and are fully aware of their unworthiness. Also, Peter, your leaders, know that they are braggers, always want to get there first, and are scared stiff of the cops. They will deny you before the cock crows thrice. And John, your leaders, they will go into the tomb with you. In fact, they're the only ones who care about you enough the way Pharaoh cared about the Israelites. He hated, really, to see them go after chasing them out. Who was he going to be without them? And finally, Mary, your leaders, recognize them. Call them by their real name. If you do that, they will also call you by your real name. And don't worry too much about how you used to be a plastic bottle and are now becoming a vessel. Even Thoreau says he was partly leaves and vegetable mold himself. Even Michael Pollan tells us, weeds are us. We are weeds. The question for today's mutual mentors this Easter 2014 is this: what do we do when we outgrow our religion? You see, we outgrow our religion every single generation. And the only thing different right now is we're outgrowing it more quickly, more rapidly. God is still speaking and wants us to outgrow our last interpretation of what God said. And so we midrash. We make the art of midrash our mentor and don't put the past down so much as find it and haul it into the present for the future. Amen.